Good morning. It's definitely a Monday. So, things I forgot to tell in my period one from the lectures. So, the Japanese were able to achieve a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. They did not intend for it to be an entirely sneak attack, in that they had transmitted to their embassy in Washington the declaration of war with the intent that the embassy staff in Washington, the Japanese embassy staff, would translate it and would deliver it to the American Secretary of State, Cordell Hull, a few minutes before the bombs started falling. Therefore, technically, it wouldn't be a sneak attack. However, the embassy in Washington, the Japanese embassy in Washington, had its code-breaking and translator staff off duty, and the ambassador decided to give his people a night off. So instead of calling them in to translate this rather important message, he and his personal secretary chose to record it, and they weren't that good at translating and recording, and the result was that the Japanese ended up speaking to Secretary of State Hull about 2 hours after the attack. So it was a sneak attack, and even had their plan gone off, it still would have basically been a sneak attack. It's like, ooh, declaration of war, and then, 10 minutes later on the other side of the world, they start attacking. The fact that it's a sneak attack is going to be very important because up until this point, the American people had been divided. There was an anti-war faction led by the most famous gentleman, the most famous aviator in America, Charles Lindbergh, who had successfully done a solo flight across the Atlantic back in the 20s. He was the head of what was called the America First movement. The America First movement wanted to keep out of the war. Now, it just so happens that Lindbergh and his wife had been guests of Hitler's on several occasions. So Lindbergh was trying to keep us out of war. The fact that over 3,000 Americans are killed in a sneak attack unifies the country like nothing before. And we are ready, gentlemen, we are ready to go to war as a people. Ridiculous numbers of young men, Monday, December 8th, go to recruitment stations, and not so young men offering to fight the Japanese. Now we come to one of the more interesting, silly bits. Hitler, had he done nothing, might have avoided being at war with the United States, at least officially. But Hitler was angry at us because we had intervened in the Battle of the Atlantic, and for the last 4 or 5 months, before December 1941, American forces and German forces were in a secret undeclared Navy war. Hitler decided because of this, well, let's just do it for real. And so a couple of days after December 7th, Hitler declares war on the United States, making it very easy. In praising Pearl Harbor, Hitler ends up getting the ire of a lot of Americans who, up until this point, couldn't care less about fighting the Nazis, but instead wanted to destroy Japan for what they did. Finally, on Monday, December 8th, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt speaks before a joint session of Congress, famously saying yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan launched a dastardly and unprovoked attack upon the American base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. From that moment, the Empire of Japan and the United States of America are in a state of war. And because of Pearl Harbor, we're in it to win it to full victory. The Japanese attempt to shock us into submitting to a peace on their terms backfired mightily. in the sneak attack. Admiral Yamamoto famously says, I fear, this is after the attack, that all we have done is awaken a sleeping dragon and filled him with a terrible wrath. So those are things I forgot to mention during my recordings to Period 1. They were mentioned in Period 2, and they will be in 3, but now they're here for the record.